Welcome to Rad2, another daily reader for Reddit. Like and subscribe for daily Reddit videos. What is the scariest story you know that is 100% true? I think you did the right thing regardless. If for nothing else, you made sure he didn't bleed out before facing the justice he so rightfully deserved. You sending him to the probably helped with the police getting a hold of him. And even then, didn't know how he'd been injured. He just saw an injured person and his first reaction was to help him. That's definitely a good thing, even if the guy ended up being a filthy kiddie rapist. Plot twist, it was the 6-year-old. Damn girl deserves medal. From the Wikipedia article, it looks like it was a bit more than fizzing. They think it created an 82-foot wave of water foam and swept away one side of the lake. Also, all of the trees near the lake were knocked down. It sounds like it was more like, imagine swimming in a lake of Coca-Cola and someone dropping in a Mentos the size of a house. All the flies and mosquitoes had died. This scares me far more than the death of the people and livestock, because no matter where you go, you always expect for at least one fly or mosquito to be there. But to find even those things dead, my god. Hey, I mean, I wouldn't be complaining about the mosquitoes, mostly because I'd be dead too. But that's beside the point. The part of this story that freaked me out was she tried to run. He grabbed her by the arm and turned and hacked her with the hatchet. She said she watched as her dismembered arm clung to his forearm after he separated it. A complete lack of empathy. The dude is a genuine psychopath. After his release, the prosecutor said he felt no guilt, didn't even feel responsible, described himself as a muddle-headed old man, and wouldn't agree never to do it again. Which makes it even more shocking he was released. He literally wouldn't agree not to rape and cut people's arms off. And the justice system was like, we'll just give her and see how she goes. He went on to murder another woman and was sentenced to death. What really upsets me most about this is that Singleton was released from jail for good behavior, and went on to murder a different woman a few years later. Roxanne Hayes. What really upsets me most about this what absolutely freaking infuriates me about this. I think in these scenarios we can safely say that if you can rape someone, chop their freaking arms off and leave them to die, you aren't ever safe to be released. Well, he hasn't chopped any arms off or raped anyone in the last 2 years while in jail. So he is pretty much good to be released early. What the frick were they actually thinking? Wrong. Trendy talking point. But wrong. 1. It was 8 years. The sentence then was 14 years, not 25 to life. 3 strikes like now. 2. It was California State Prison, which is notoriously overcrowded. So keeping him in prison was arguable inhumane treatment. Here's an article from the time about people knew he was not and could not be rehabilitated. And even other Cal State prisons would not accept him to process his parole, because everyone knew he would reoffend. And just like in this thread, people were arguing about what to do when someone can't be rehabilitated. There's no profit in long or death sentences in 1978 California. So stop with your 2019 crap and try some 1978 context. Content.time.com. Inhumane. Like this piece of crap even deserved a breath. John List killed his whole family, wife, mother, daughter and 2 sons. He meticulously planned the whole thing, cancelling all delivery services, excusing the kids from school, and even turned the air conditioning as low as possible to preserve the bodies for as long as possible. After he killed them all, he placed the bodies in sleeping bags and lined them up. He then wrote a letter to his pastor explaining why he had to kill them. He then leaves and isn't heard from again. 18 years later he's remarried and doing the same job as before, but this time he doesn't have any children. He's finally arrested after a tip was given to the FBI. Crazy thing is that because he planned it so well, the bodies weren't discovered until a month after the murders, so he had a huge head start and essentially started a new life in the same career and was heavily involved in a new church town in Virginia. Took 18 years to capture him. The tip came in when old neighbors of his, in his new life, saw a sculpted recreation of him as he would look like then, because the last picture of him was 18 years prior. The sculpture worked with a criminal profiler and pictures of John's parents to work out how he would look. If you want to learn more about it, there is a really good episode of Forensic Files that covers it. It seems like every criminal in a certain decade, 80s, 90s, Had the same fashion sense. It must have just been popular back then. My dad had the same kind of glasses and didn't murder me at all. The horror movie, The Stepfather, is based on his life. Interesting thing is that it was released a few years before List was even caught. Very good movie. Edit. For those confused, I'm talking about the 1987 movie, not 2009. The original is a classic. The remake is garbage. Oh, sweetie, you'll like this one, it's based on a true story. Hey, that's not how it went, they changed it. Wife, wait, what? What did the letter say that he left? He pretty much explained that he killed his family to ensure their entry into heaven because he was worried they were straying from their faith. So in a way, he thought he was saving their souls. One of my friends had someone following her home, hiding in the bushes so they couldn't be seen. She booked it to her house, got inside, and he was watching the house from the outside. She called the cops. They come along quietly and got the jump on him. He had condoms, handcuffs, and a knife. When they got his DNA, it turned out that he was linked to a half-dozen rapes in the area. She credits her regimen of running sprints to outrunning him that night and firmly believes she would have been raped if she couldn't outrun him then. Not trying to make light of the story or anything, but he actually had condoms. Never thought of a rapist doing protected sex. It happens quite a lot, I think. Very little chance of depositing any DNA and thus less chance of getting caught. The same way you'd wear gloves when carrying out a crime if you were even slightly using your brain. Rule number 2, double tap. Rule number 4, seatbelts. In my town in the early 90s there was a notorious killer that had all of BC, Canada on watch. My wife's mother, years and years before I knew them, had been home alone while her husband was in England doing tree surgeon work. Arborist. She was in her laundry room when a man walked up from her basement, completely scaring her. She freaked out and said, "What the hell are you doing here?" He said he was friends with her husband and was just coming to see if he was here. Apparently he told him he could just walk in, which she knew was bullcrap. She was smart enough to tell him that he was just at the store and would be back any minute. He said he would wait outside for him. As soon as he left she called the police, but he was long gone by the time they got here. 2 weeks later, the killer was caught, his mugshot put on TV, and it was the guy in her house. Edit. The guy's name was Terry Driver. Here's a link to his wiki. Holy crap, this is horrifying. What a smart woman. My family has a similar story and I'm pretty sure some of you serial killer buffs out there might figure out who it is before the reveal because their story is pretty unique. When my parents were in college they went on a trip down to Florida. They had met through mutual friends and were down there together but hadn't gone on a date yet. My dad and one of his friends were planning to meet my mom and some of her friends at a hotel, but being the carefree college guys they lost track of time and realized it was impossible to get to the hotel on time by walking. They decided the best solution to their problem was to hitchhike, and a car with 2 women picked him up. Everything seemed fine until the driver asked them if it was okay to stop for gas. My dad and his friend agreed it was no problem since they were making good time, and she drove into a gas station. She then pumped her car full of gas before hopping back in and flooring it, basically stealing the gas with 2 hitchhikers in the back. My dad and his friend were beginning to freak out when she pulled a gun from under her seat and asked, "Are we gonna have a problem?" or something like that. My dad and his friend shook their heads vehemently because what else do you do in that situation? She then drove them to the hotel and dropped them off without so much as a scratch, and they kinda thought nothing of it until the news started reporting on a serial killer in Florida known as Aileen Wuornos. He took one look at her picture and instantly recognized her as the driver. The only reason my dad thinks she didn't straight up kill them was because they were super polite and respectful to her, and her victims were usually scumbag guys trying to take advantage of her. TL. Dr. Aileen Wuornos is the reason my dad got to his first date with mom on time. Edit. Spelling. Imagine that ending on How I Met Your Mother. An acquaintance of mine sent his son to triathlon camp in Texas. A week later, his son came back from camp. The next day, the son was complaining of a headache. 4 days later, he was dead, healthy, happy, fit 12-year-old 1 week, dead the next. Turns out the lake had Naegleria fowleri, the brain-eating amoeba. Nothing scares me as irrationally as already being dead and waiting for your body to catch on. Link for those interested. The childhood best friend of one of my exes died this way. Maybe not of this exact amoeba, but a waterborne amoeba that ate him neurologically. I did not know there was such a thing at the time. I had no freaking idea. So when my ex told me about this I laughed. I assumed he was pulling my leg, being a butthole, lying to me. No, it was absolutely true and I was the butthole. I have had an absolute horror of these amoeba ever since. When signs say, do not swim, there's a really good freaking chance they're indicating something. Like this. Don't freaking swim people. Don't swim. Which of course the poor little boy cannot be blamed for. How absolutely awful. Yeah, definitely. I read that if you're showing symptoms of rabies, you're dead. Same with cancer. If you're far enough along to show physical symptoms, you're just dead. There's nothing you can do. Naglaria is terrifying to me. You can get it just from getting water up your nose swimming in a lake or... I've heard but I'm too lazy to check. There have been people who got it from using a neti pot. Yep, the amoeba needs to come into contact with the top of your nose. So you have to snort the water. Or, if you happen to live in Louisiana in 2013, they weren't using enough shoreline in the water supply. So people using neti pots with tap water were exposed. The good news is that the brain eaters really like specific conditions. They like very warm, ATF+, stagnant water with zero salt or chlorine. So even a little bit of chlorine or bromine is enough to protect yourself. In the US, only lakes in the South, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Georgia, etc., meet those conditions. And humans don't want to spend a lot of time in that water since it's usually pretty gross. Even then, you still have to get the water up your nose. Water skiing or jet skiing are the two common causes. Edit. Also cases in MN at AZ. Interestingly, there was a guy here who did an armor about a treatment. You just have to move quickly. Because once a person loses their sense of smell, it's already over. Because the amoeba have eaten your olfactory bulb, the part of your brain responsible for smelling. Then it continues eating, and eventually ends up at your brain stem, which controls things like breathing and heart rate. I'm now testing my smelling abilities just to convince myself I don't have this. I mean, I don't have any of the other symptoms either, but my irrational brain just has to confirm that I really don't have it. 3 sailors survived the sinking of the USS West Virginia at Pearl Harbor, only to die 16 days later. Due to the lack of air, the Navy knew they were there, but couldn't get to them. 16 days to die. Harrison Akene 2013 Nigerian boat sinking. Was trapped in the boat for 3 days at the bottom of the ocean. en.wikipedia.org Short interview www.youtube.com Full rescue video www.youtube.com At 5:30 the diver finds the area Harrison is in, sees a hand a few feet from his face and reaches out to grab it. Only then did they realize the person was alive. 30 seconds later the diver enters the air pocket Harrison has been surviving in. This is a hometown story that stayed with me. It happened literally right around the corner from where I grew up. Maybe a 2-minute drive away. Judy Kirby murdered 6 children and 1 adult by intentionally driving the wrong way on a divided highway in an attempt to commit suicide. She had been hospitalized for depression, but had also just ended a relationship with her ex-husband's brother and was, by some reports, involved in drug trafficking, and fearing an imminent arrest she picked up her sister's son, who was celebrating his 10th birthday that day. She then loaded her 3 children into the car, supposedly to pick up a gift for the nephew. Instead, she went missing with the carload of kids. A short time later, calls started coming into 911 about a car going the wrong way down the highway at a high rate of speed. They made it to about 90 seconds before a head-on collision with another vehicle, driven by a father with 2 children and another child along for the ride. The crash annihilated both vehicles. The only survivors were Kirby herself, and the child who was along for the ride in the other car. There were pieces of children all over the highway. She was sentenced to 215 years in prison. How do people do crap like that? My grandfather was an engineer, architect for US Steel through the early 70s. One day a co-worker who was getting divorced brought his young son and young daughter for a tour of a steel mill, proceeded to bypass the admittedly lax security of the 60s. Picks up his kids and jumps with them into some molten steel. People that kill kids are horrifying, but parents who kill their own kids, Jesus. Edit. My grandfather never shared any more of the story than what I described. Didn't think he would have, but checked with my dad, who also asked what happened. Grandfather said they got rid of didn't use that batch of steel. Whatever that means. I look at my baby son playing on the floor, and just can't imagine what goes so wrong in your life mind that you come up with that solution. My God, you'd float on the surface for a moment. I have to believe, that the searing temperatures would have ended it extremely quickly. But, yeah, I don't think I've ever repeated this story before. You know, sharing it with all of Reddit. It really messed with my head as a kid. Years ago when I was 8, my family lived in this big weird house kind of on the edge of a small town. The school district was in the middle of a big restructuring, so even though we were only a couple grades apart, my brother and I went to different schools and took different buses. This left me as the last person to leave in the morning and the first person to get home in the afternoon, which meant it was my job to make sure all the lights were off and the door was locked. One morning I noticed the basement door was open and the light was on, so before I left I turned off the light and closed the door. When I got home that afternoon the light was on and the door was open again. I just assumed that I'd forgotten to actually take care of it when I noticed it in the morning, so I went over to turn off the light and close the door. When I got to the top of the basement stairs I looked and there was a big shadowy male figure towards the bottom of the staircase. I freaked out, slammed the door and pushed a bunch of boxes against it and then went and hid in my closet. For months I didn't tell my family because I was positive what I had seen was a ghost and didn't think anyone would believe me. Then about a year after that incident my mom and her boyfriend realized that small amounts of money had been going missing for months, totaling around $800 minus $900, but never more than $60 at once. So we all walked around the house with flashlights trying to figure out how they could have gotten in. Turns out some creep was climbing in through a small hole in the outside of the house, shimmying through a crawl space, then coming up into the house through the basement. Realizing I had been alone in the house with him on at least one occasion was one of the worst, most terrifying moments I've ever had. Edit. Whoa, this blew up way more than I expected. I'm doing my best to respond to comments, questions. Sorry if I end up missing yours. My brother's ex-GF had 2 older sisters. They died before she was born. One day they decided to play hide and seek or something. So anyway, they both climbed inside a chest and accidentally locked themselves in. They suffocated. That really sucks. When I was a kid there were a lot of PSA type things about kids not playing in abandoned refrigerators for that reason. That is terrifying. It's particularly terrifying to me because I remember when I was younger something similar almost happened to me and my cousin. She had a daybed and we decided to get behind it and push it against the wall so we could play and nap in the dark. It got unbearably hot and we realized we couldn't breathe after about 30 minutes. If it wouldn't have also gotten so hot from our fear, body heat, lack of oxygen, we might have actually suffocated because we were getting lightheaded. It was scary, but eventually we pulled the bed away from the wall. I have no idea how that could happen on carpet. Bizarre freak accidents are just so strange. I'm truly sorry for you, brothers XGF. Edit. thebedi.imager.com. Thanks for watching Rad2. Like and subscribe for daily Reddit videos. If you like these videos, check out the original Rad channel.